It was a sunny morning in Ouagadougou in May 2025 when Ibrahim Traoré received a call from his international advisor, Dr. Alonso Ouedraogo. "Mr. President," Ouedraogo said, "we've received an interesting invitation from the United States. The White House wants you to participate in a forum on global education, alongside Karoline Leavitt, the new press secretary." Ibrahim paused in his review of the country's education reports. He was well aware of Karoline's reputation, a young aggressive politician known for her provocative remarks about foreign leaders. "What's the format?" Ibrahim asked, curious about the intentions behind the invitation. "A live forum broadcast globally, moderated by CNN. The theme is transforming education systems in the 21st century, Dr. Ouedraogo explained. Apparently, they want to contrast American and African approaches." Ibrahim smiled slightly. At just 35, he had revolutionized Burkina Faso's education system in a way that had impressed international organizations. "Take it," he said. "This is an opportunity to show the world what Africa can teach about education." Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., Karoline Leavitt sat in her White House office reviewing briefing notes on Burkina Faso. "This young president thinks he can lecture us about education?" she scoffed to her staff. "I'm going to show the world he's just another third-world leader trying to sound relevant." Her aide, Emily Rodriguez, held up the latest education data from Burkina Faso. "Karoline, Burkina Faso's literacy and school completion numbers have increased dramatically. Maybe you should consider a more respectful approach." "Emily, you don't understand international politics," Karoline replied, shaking her head. "These African leaders inflate numbers to seem competent. My job is to expose the reality." The forum was scheduled for Thursday. Two completely opposite views on education were heading for a showdown no one expected. In the days leading up to the event, President Ibrahim Traoré immersed himself in detailed preparations. In his office at the presidential palace, he met with Aminata Compaoré, the Minister of Education, to review the nation's progress since he had taken office. "I want all data verified and updated," Ibrahim instructed. Karoline Leavitt is known for attacking the credibility of anything that challenges Western narratives. Aminata presented impressive achievements. Literacy rates have increased from 29% to 78% in just 3 years. We've built 2,147 new schools. We've implemented digital education in 95% of institutions. We've established 23 technical universities. The results speak for themselves. President Ibrahim nodded, but he knew that statistics alone wouldn't be enough. "We need real stories," he said. "I want students who've benefited, teachers whose lives have changed, and communities transformed through education." Meanwhile, in Washington, Karoline Leavitt was digging deeper, but with a very different goal in mind. "I want dirt," she told her research team. "Educational deficiencies, illiteracy. Anything that proves this African kid doesn't know what he's talking about. A country that barely has electricity can't lecture America about education." Her aide, Michael Thompson, warned, "Karoline, be careful. Ibrahim Traoré has recognition from both UNESCO and Harvard for his educational innovations. Attacking him without a solid basis could backfire." "Michael, trust me," Karoline replied arrogantly. "I've destroyed arguments by politicians much smarter than this African." At CNN headquarters, Anderson Cooper was preparing questions that promised to set the forum ablaze. "We want substantive debate," he told his staff. "Real, intellectual confrontation, not empty diplomacy." The stage was set for one of the most explosive educational forums in American television history. On the evening of May 22, 2025, international anticipation filled the air. At CNN's Atlanta studios, technicians made final adjustments. Ibrahim Traoré connected via satellite from Ouagadougou, testing his connection. In the Washington studio, Karoline Leavitt adjusted her blue blazer, confident this would be an easy victory. "Good evening, world," Anderson Cooper began. "Tonight, we have a fascinating forum between President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso and Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt on global education transformation." The screen split to show Ibrahim in his presidential office, with books and the Burkina Faso flag in the background, and Karoline in the state-of-the-art Washington studio. President Traoré, Anderson began. Karoline has been arguing that developed countries like the United States should lead global education reforms. How do you respond? Ibrahim smiled politely. Mr. Cooper, I respect America's expertise in education, but innovation has no nationality. Sometimes the most effective solutions come from unexpected places. Karoline interrupted with obvious sarcasm. President Traoré, with all due respect, you lead a country where half the population was illiterate just a few years ago. How can you lecture on education to a nation that created Harvard, MIT, and Stanford? Ms. Leavitt, Ibrahim replied calmly, it is precisely because we have faced greater challenges that we've developed more creative solutions. When you have limited resources, you must be smarter, not just richer. Karoline shook her head condescendingly. Smart? Where exactly did you go to school? Which American university did you attend? Because frankly, it seems like your education came from guerrilla manuals. The comment was deliberately offensive and prejudiced. Ibrahim paused, his expression remaining calm. But Anderson Cooper could feel the tension rising. Miss Leavitt, that was unnecessary, Anderson said. Unnecessary but true, Karoline replied. We cannot pretend that African education is the same as American education. Ibrahim finally spoke. Thank you for that demonstration. Mrs. Leavitt. Now I know exactly what kind of education you represent. Ibrahim Traoré took a deep breath and looked directly into the camera, his calmness a stark contrast to Karoline's arrogance. Ms. Leavitt, since you questioned my education, allow me to clarify a few points that your research apparently did not cover. Diplomas and certificates flashed across the screen. Bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the Kwame Nkrumah, University of Science and Technology, Ghana, first-class master's degree in public administration from the Sorbonne. Paris, full scholarship for academic merit MBA from the London School of Economics. Completed while serving as a military officer. Karoline began to look uncomfortable, but Ibrahim wasn't finished. I'm also fluent in French, English, Portuguese, Arabic, and 4 local African languages. How many languages do you speak, Ms. Leavitt? That's not the point, Karoline stammered. The point is educational relevance. You're right, Ibrahim agreed. So let's talk about relevance. You mentioned Harvard, MIT, and Stanford, prestigious institutions that, interestingly enough, are now studying our educational methods. Official documents appeared on the screen. Harvard Business School has just created a study program on our rural education model. MIT is implementing our engineering teaching methods using limited resources. Stanford wants to partner to study our approach to mass digital education. Karoline tried to interrupt, but Ibrahim continued inexorably. Do you know why these American universities want to learn from us? Because we transformed a country with a 29% literacy rate into an African leader in STEM education in 3 years. Something no American state has managed to do. These numbers are inflated, Karoline protested desperately. They are verified by UNESCO, the World Bank, and, interestingly, the American Department of Education, Ibrahim said calmly. Your own government confirms our educational competence. Anderson Cooper leaned forward, fascinated by the direction of the debate. President Traoré, can you elaborate on these methods that impressed American institutions? Of course, Ibrahim smiled. Starting with the most important thing, we teach our students to respect knowledge regardless of where it comes from. Apparently a revolutionary concept for some. Ibrahim Traoré decided to take his exposure of Karoline's ignorance further. Ms. Leavitt, since you value American academic credentials so highly, you might be interested to know that I'm a visiting professor at 3 American universities. Karoline's face turned visibly pale. That's impossible. University of California, Berkeley, where I teach innovative governance, Columbia University, where I teach sustainable development, and Georgetown, where I give seminars on youth leadership, Ibrahim said calmly. I can give you contact numbers for the deans if you want to check. Anderson Cooper was clearly impressed. That's extraordinary, President Traoré. Even more extraordinary, Ibrahim continued, is that these lectures are always packed. American students want to learn about how we transformed education with a budget 50 times smaller than that of any American state. Karoline tried one last desperate card. But you still lead a poor country. How can you talk about educational success? Ibrahim smiled for the first time, with genuine amusement. Ms. Leavitt, Burkina Faso may be financially strapped, but our students consistently outperform Americans in international math, science, and programming competitions. On the screen flashed results from academic Olympiads. Last year, our students won 47 medals in international competitions. Our 16-year-old programmers create applications that American companies buy for millions. Furthermore, Ibrahim continued, our college graduation rate is 94%. What is the American rate, Ms. Leavitt? Karoline remained silent, knowing the American rate was considerably lower. 73%, Ibrahim said, answering her unspoken question. Our poorly educated students graduate from college more often than Americans. But most importantly, Ibrahim concluded, we teach our young people that intelligence has no color, nationality, or economic status, that respect for knowledge is essential for growth, lessons that apparently some people have yet to learn. The silence in the studio was deafening. Karoline had been completely dismantled. Karoline Leavitt was visibly shocked, her initial arrogance completely shattered by Ibrahim's meticulous response. I wasn't questioning African intelligence in general, she said, trying to recover. I was just... What exactly, Ms. Leavitt? Ibrahim interrupted softly. Questioning my competence based on preconceptions about African education? Assuming that American universities are automatically superior? Anderson Cooper watched in fascination as Karoline struggled to form a coherent response. President Traoré, you have clearly prepared extensively for this forum. Indeed, I needed no special preparation, Ibrahim replied. These are simply realizations of our daily work. Ms. Leavitt apparently did not do her due diligence before making judgments. Karoline tried to change the subject. But let's be realistic about educational resources. The United States invests billions in education, and yet, Ibrahim interrupted her. Its students lag behind countries with much smaller budgets in international rankings. Maybe the problem isn't money, but approach. On the screen appeared global education rankings showing American decline in science and math. Burkina Faso has risen 47 places in education rankings in the last 3 years. The United States has fallen 12 places in the same period. Karoline was now visibly irritated. You're distorting statistics. I'm quoting data from the U.S. Department of Education itself, Ibrahim said calmly. If you consider that distortion, perhaps you should question your own methods of collection. Besides, Ibrahim continued, our teachers earn decent wages, relative to the local cost of living. They can focus on teaching instead of working 3 jobs to survive. Seemingly a revolutionary concept. Anderson Cooper asked a question that Karoline clearly wasn't expecting. Ms. Leavitt, how do you respond to these points about educational efficiency? She remained silent for several seconds before murmuring, we would need to analyze this data in more detail. Of course, Ibrahim said gently. Careful analysis is always wise, before making public judgments. Karoline Leavitt's awkward silence echoed around the studio as Ibrahim Traoré patiently awaited her next response. Anderson Cooper, sensing the need to keep the forum moving, asked another question. President Traoré, what advice would you give to education systems struggling with limited resources? Ibrahim looked directly at Karoline before answering. The first piece of advice is to never underestimate the capacity for innovation when resources are limited. Necessity forces creativity in ways that abundance never can. Our teachers developed teaching methods using cell phones when we didn't have computers. They created science labs with recycled materials when we couldn't afford expensive equipment. These solutions are now being studied by wealthy universities. Karoline finally attempted to answer. But surely you agree that adequate resources improve educational quality? Of course, Ibrahim agreed. But resources without vision are wasted. Vision without resources forces innovation. The ideal combination is to have both, but if I have to choose, I prefer vision. Ms. Leavitt, Ibrahim continued, your initial question about where I went to school reveals something important, a tendency to measure competence by institutional prestige rather than actual results. Anderson Cooper leaned forward. Can you elaborate on that? Gladly, Ibrahim replied. Harvard is great because it produces results, not because it has a famous name. If a rural school in Burkina Faso produces better engineers than Harvard, then it deserves respect. Prestige should follow performance, not precede it. Karoline attempted a weak defense. But tradition and reputation matter in education. They matter in perpetuating the status quo, Ibrahim said. Innovation comes from questioning traditions, not blindly worshiping them. Our students learn to think critically about everything, including educational authority. That's why, Ibrahim concluded, they ask questions that bother, propose solutions that surprise, and achieve results that defy expectations. Real education should produce independent thinkers, not prestige repeaters. The contrast between Ibrahim's wisdom and Karoline's empty arrogance was becoming painfully obvious to millions of viewers. Ibrahim Traoré decided to make his most devastating observation yet. Miss Leavitt, there is something I should share that might explain our conversation today. Karoline looked nervously, sensing another embarrassing revelation. Last month, I was invited to speak at the annual Conference of American Presidents on educational innovation in resource-constrained settings. Do you know who organized the event? Anderson Cooper was visibly curious. Who organized it, President Traoré? The United States Department of Education, Ibrahim said calmly. Apparently, they value our educational expertise more than their own press secretary. Karoline was visibly mortified. That can't be right. I can provide you with a confirmation email from Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona if you'd like, Ibrahim offered. He specifically mentioned interest in our accelerated literacy methods and rural STEM education. More interesting still, Ibrahim continued, 3 American universities have requested permission to send delegations to study our methods on site, including one you mentioned, MIT. Official letters from the universities appeared on the screen. MIT wants to understand how we teach advanced engineering using minimal resources. Harvard is interested in our youth leadership programs. Stanford wants to copy our inclusive digital education model. Karoline tried desperately. But that doesn't mean you're superior. I never said we're superior, Ibrahim corrected gently. I said we're different, that we face unique challenges that have developed unique solutions, that valuable knowledge can come from anywhere. True educational superiority, Ibrahim concluded, would be to recognize that learning is a two-way process. America can teach us a lot. We can teach something too. Arrogance prevents both sides from growing. Anderson Cooper shook his head in admiration. President Traoré, that is a remarkably mature perspective on international educational cooperation. It is a necessary perspective, Ibrahim replied. In the 21st century, no country can afford to ignore useful knowledge, regardless of its geographical origin. Having been completely intellectually dismantled, Karoline Leavitt was silent for long moments. Anderson Cooper was about to close the forum when she finally spoke, her voice noticeably different. President Traoré, I must apologize. Ibrahim looked surprised for the first time that evening. It is not necessary, Ms. Leavitt. Yes, it is necessary, Karoline insisted, clearly struggling with her own humility. I came to this forum with terrible preconceptions about African education. I assumed that American knowledge was automatically superior. I was completely wrong. Anderson Cooper watched this unexpected turn of events with fascination. What changed your perspective, Miss Leavitt? Every fact President Traoré presented shattered my assumptions, Karoline said honestly. I cannot argue with concrete results. I cannot pretend that my ignorance was justified. Ibrahim leaned forward, genuinely interested. Ms. Leavitt, admitting error takes courage. That is admirable courage. Karoline laughed bitterly. This is a well-deserved humiliation. I represent the American government, and I have demonstrated complete ignorance of significant educational innovations. But now you know, Ibrahim said gently. Knowledge is a process. No one is born knowing everything. Karoline took a deep breath. President Traoré, I would like to make a formal request on behalf of the American government. I invite you to present Burkina Faso educational methods to our state secretaries of education. Anderson Cooper was clearly impressed. That is extraordinary, Ms. Leavitt. It is necessary, she replied. If Burkina Faso has developed solutions that American universities want to study, our policymakers need to learn as well. Ibrahim smiled genuinely for the first time. It would be an honor to share our experiences, Ms. Leavitt. Education improves when we share knowledge rather than defend it. There is more, Karoline said. I would like to propose an exchange program between American and Burkina Faso educators. Real, two-way learning. Now you are speaking like a true educator, Ibrahim replied, clearly pleased with Karoline's transformation. 6 months after the forum that shocked the education world, the fallout was still spreading globally. Karoline Leavitt was in Ouagadougou, leading the third American delegation of educators to study Burkina Faso methods. I never imagined I would be here learning about education, she said in an interview with CNN. But this country has lessons that the whole world needs to hear. The exchange program had become an international model. 23 countries had requested similar programs. Dr. Wedro told Ibrahim, Burkina Faso has become a global benchmark for educational innovation. Ibrahim was in his office reviewing proposals for partnerships when Aminata Compaoré walked in with some impressive statistics. Sir, we have received 847 requests from international universities to study our methods. Our educational influence has grown 500% since the forum. The most important thing, Ibrahim said, is that we are proving that educational cooperation benefits everyone. America is improving its rural methods using our techniques. We are advancing our research with American technology. Karoline had become a fierce advocate for African education. My initial ignorance was embarrassing, she said in a speech, at Harvard, but it taught me that arrogance is the greatest barrier to learning. The impact spread beyond education. Other sectors in the United States began to question assumptions about African capabilities. A political analyst said, Ibrahim opened doors for genuine cooperation. One quiet evening, Ibrahim walked through the palace gardens with Ajara. You changed global perceptions about African education, she said. I didn't change perceptions, Ibrahim corrected. I just showed you a reality that already existed, a world you were willing to see. And Karoline? Ajara asked. She proved something important, that intelligent people can acknowledge mistakes and grow. That is more valuable than never making mistakes. A year later, Karoline published a book, Lessons from Burkina Faso, How Humility Transformed My Educational Vision. It became an international bestseller. Ibrahim Traoré taught me that true education begins with acknowledging what we don't know, she wrote in the dedication. Your response not only defended your country, it educated the world.